Mr. Time. It really is a pantomime.
Walter the Worm. Walter was a worm who lived in a hole, not a damp, muddy sort of a hole, but a warm, cozy sort of a hole. A warm, cozy hole at the bottom of Mr. Happy's garden. Walter was very happy living in his hole, except when the grass was being mown, and when the sprinkler was turned on, and when everyone was playing football in the garden. But on the whole, he was happy in his hole. He had no desire to go anywhere else. He had no desire to travel the world. One morning, not that long ago, Walter's alarm went off, early. Walter rolled out of bed. He brushed his teeth and had breakfast. Yes, worms do have breakfast. The sun was just rising as Walter poked his nose, yes, worms do have noses, out of his hole to see what he could see. It was a beautiful sunny day. Walter decided to go for an early morning walk, or rather, an early morning wiggle. Walter was not the only person who had set their alarm early. The early bird had also got up very early. She had got up early because she was hungry, and she had been taught from a very young age that the early bird gets the worm. The early bird's beady eye had spotted Walter as he left his hole, and Walter had spotted the early bird's shadow crossing the lawn as she swooped down from her nest. "Oh, help!" cried Walter. With an agility that you would never have suspected, Walter dived for his hole. He wriggled as fast as he could wriggle. He wriggled down his hole until a quarter of him was safe. He wriggled until half of him was safe. He wriggled until 3/4 of him was safe. But Walter was a rather long worm. Just as the last little bit of his tail, yes, worms do have tails, was about to reach safely, the early bird caught it. As Walter felt himself being pulled in the hole, he grabbed hold of the end of his bed. The early bird pulled and pulled and pulled, and Walter was stretched and stretched and stretched, until, with a loud snap, like an elastic band, Walter was catapulted out of his hole. "Oh, help!" cried Walter for the second time that morning, as the early bird carried him high into the sky. "Please don't eat me," pleaded Walter. The early bird looked down at Walter as a huge tear rolled down his cheek. Yes, worms do cry. And suddenly the early bird felt sorry for Walter. In fact, she felt so sorry that she had lost her appetite. "Don't worry," she said. "I'll take you home." As she tilted in the sky, they flew over a beach. "What's that?" asked Walter. "That's a beach," replied the early bird. "What's a beach?" asked Walter. The early bird was astonished that Walter had never seen a beach, but it was a very long way to the beach, or at least a very long wriggle for a very small worm. So the early bird flew down and landed on the beach. Walter had a lovely day at the seaside. He and the early bird made a sandcastle, and they ate ice cream, and they went for a swim in the sea, and then as the sun was setting, the early bird took Walter home. Walter made himself supper, and then he went to bed, smiling as he thought about how lucky he had been to meet such a friendly early bird. Before he turned on his light, he was about to set his alarm clock when he had a sudden thought, and he did not set his alarm. He did not set his alarm because he realized that the late worm avoids the early bird.